Sandra Bear, who's been facilitating the whole session for us, both earlier today and this one, to take us through from here. Sandra, over to you.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you all for returning to our solution storming session. And for those of you on live stream, I'm going to give you a little bit of background about what we did a couple hours ago with this very same group that you see on the screen. We did a session called question storming, and that meant asking a very difficult question called how can we reimagine high streets? I think H.L. Mencken said it best. He said, for every complex problem, there is an answer that is simple, clear, and wrong. So our whole purpose in question storming is to really explore a difficult question and not jump to solutions, not get too quickly to answers that may or may not really look at all the interdependencies of a very complex issue. Certainly today we're facing so many crises in our society across the globe, from the pandemic to social and racial injustice to vexing income inequality, to certainly the climate crisis, which has stayed with us, and in countries all over the world, political divisiveness and political challenges. Question storming looks at all of our environment and says, can we ask a difficult question and keep asking, keep exploring that question to come up with maybe never before discovered solutions. That's the whole point of question storming. And we spent an hour doing it a couple hours ago, as I said. We actually, among the 12 people on the call, we actually generated over 200 questions about this idea of reimagining High Street. The other opportunity in question storming is that you listen, that you really learn how to listen to the question before you. You listen to your own ideas, your own heart, and then you ask another question that maybe helps us see the problem differently. So the point of our solution storming session is not, absolutely not, to come up with immediate solutions, but to query each of these panelists that are all expert in some level of community and city and high streets, to say, what insights did you gain from the session we hosted earlier? What new ways of thinking have maybe popped into your brain? And are there programs or solutions currently in place that might even work to help us reimagine a high street? A couple of the questions are, what is a high street? Is it needed or not? Do we really know who owns the changes that might occur in a high street? So without further ado, I'd like to ask each panelist to give us their insights and maybe point us to some new directions going forward in 2021 and certainly beyond. I'd like to start, Ken, with you to give us your insights and maybe some suggestions. We're asking each panelist to talk for about a minute or two at the most. Go ahead, Ken.
Hi, I think the session was very good and some very good questions came up. I think for me, one of the things that needs to happen with high streets is that we need government central to have a look at the business rates and the way that they're worked out. We have some very strange methods of doing it that end up with some very unfair levels of rating being applied to shops and retail premises. It's not something that's usually in the hands of the local authorities. It's something that's derived from central government and hasn't really been changed in many years. Other things that we were considering.
Ken, before I let you off the hook on that one, who might generate that kind of, who might inspire that kind of change in the central government?
Not really sure. I did speak to one of the ministers a few years ago. I'm the area lead for the Federation of Small Businesses. And I was in the Houses of Parliament and put this question to one of the ministers. And he said, well, you come up with an idea or a solution, and we might look at it. It never happened, but something has to happen so that Amazon pay the same as would your mom and pop store.
Absolutely. You had one other point you were going to make?
Yeah, I think we need to look at how the high street needs to evolve in terms of its purpose and in light of the pandemic and the ever-growing problem of climate change.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you for that. Tina, give us your insights and maybe some thoughts about how we move forward.
Yep. Hi. Yeah, I mean, earlier was lovely. We threw so many ideas out, and I think the thing that hit me the most was people still want the high street. People still want that communication, that touch, that physical touch of picking up an object, but we accept we have online now. And I think that's the thing that maybe the high street needs to look at, is how do we mix our smaller shops to going online, making it more accessible. And every high street's going to work in a different way. Is it possible that you have a click and collect service so people can come and collect stuff? You have a shop, you pay someone to have a shop at the end of the high street where we could offer click and collect. There's something has to change in that way to make it more accessible for the newer generation, the generation that are used to looking online and internet and Google it and where can I get it? But I think the most thing that comes up when people Google is local. It's not always where can I get it, it's where can I get it locally.
Yeah. Do you think that would require sort of a new coalition of players in a local environment? Who would be in that coalition perhaps?
I think it's all the traders need to work together so that you either you share your deliveries, you have a little shop where you can, all of you take it in turns to man it, to be able to, you know, facilitate the customers needing their goods. So, yeah.
Do you have in your community, you know, I just now realized that I didn't have you introduce yourself. So tell me again, Tina, where you're from?
Oh, sorry. I'm Tina. I'm from Bristol.
Bristol. So do you have in Bristol an organization that sort of helps all of the traders within the Bristol community?
No. Every area will have an organization. So we have Chamber of Commerce's and things like that, but they're specific to our areas rather than big areas, or the councils, which the councils are pretty good, I must admit. They do talk. Well,
okay. I think we have some council members on the call here today. So good that you said that. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Rich, what's your thought about the question storming and what it might have revealed to you?
Hi there, Richard McDonough. I'm from Chipping Sodbury, and I'm one of the chairs of the Chipping Sodbury Chamber of Commerce. So Chipping Sodbury High Street is something that's of particular passion of mine. Very interesting listening to all the questions this morning. I really didn't appreciate the sheer breadth of the subject matter that we could possibly cover. The bit that always sticks in my mind is that we need a reason why we need to visit the high street. It only exists as a high street because we actually need footfall. We actually need people to walk up and down the high street. Otherwise, if we're going to buy from these shops online, those shops could be anywhere. They certainly don't need to be in a very expensive high street. So part of the way we're thinking is we need to make a high street a reason to go there, a destination as we call it. Why we go there? So that could be because I want to meet with my friends. I want to have a coffee. I want to socialize and meet with people, obviously COVID allowing. I want to just go for a nice bit of walk, a little bit of exercise, and I want to look through lots of nice shop windows and just see what's available. So that's something that a high street can do that Amazon can't. So, we need to think that way is what I took from this morning's session.
Thank you. That's, I guess there's lots of discussion around the globe now about how Amazon has made an impact on shopping and certainly personal, local engagement, I suppose. Claire, please tell us what you thought and
it might go over
ideas you have.
Fractionally go over the 2 minutes. Sorry, I've got a lot of experience. I'm Claire Fairs. I live in a little market town called Pershall.
Great, thank you.
And I've had a lot of experience in Cornwall and up here. Firstly, I've sort of taken sort of headings. Digital, there's an organisation called Maybe, and I advise all of you to have a look at what they can offer. And basically, the whole idea is that they can listen to conversations, what the consumers want, to empower those retailers to deliver what consumers want. They also listen in terms of what people are talking about in terms of the towns, and they actually have a league table. Amazing from the digital side, and I still believe many of our towns still haven't embraced the digital age, and that was before COVID. Now we're post-COVID. Maybe may well be a bit more receptive to embracing change, because that's obviously been a bit restrictive.
I'm going to interrupt you. Maybe spelled M-A-Y-B-E?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, M-A-Y-B-E.
Is it a like an artificial intelligence listening, or is it town halls? What's the mechanism?
Yeah, it's basically the concept of it is a piece of software. We all use social media all the time. We're banging messages out there, but are we actually listening?
Right.
what it is? So an example of that is a shoe shop. It was literally been handed down in generations. Their customers were literally dying off, and it was dying in Cheltenham High Street. So they maybe went in, they hadn't got a website, they hadn't got any social media, they did nothing. So they worked with them, set them up in terms of creating a digital shop window, if you like. They then started to identify keywords and listen in to the conversations, what people were talking about. And they realized there were yummy mummies within a 10-mile radius of Cheltenham that were crying out for designer trainers. So based on that intelligence, that enabled that shop owner to go to Italy to get the trainers made, to come back. And this is a good example of how digital works alongside the physical shop, because they then spat that information out. And on the morning that they launched their new range, they had 60 people in the high street. Well, those 60 people don't just go and buy the shoes. They're going to go into the coffee shops, go and shop, etc. So their intelligence, if you like, is absolutely invaluable. And I urge you all to have a look online. So I've got some really good case studies to share. And on the other side, I mean, that is really, really important in terms of the towns as well as the shops. But I think there is this need to educate. And certainly I was chair of Winchcombe Business Forum, a tiny little Cotswold market town. And the challenge that we had there was nobody talked to each other. So as a business group, we tried to be all inclusive, but you couldn't believe the infighting. So collaboration is really important, and communication. I then went on, and Pete was really supportive. We created something called the Association of Gloucester Business Groups. And the idea that was each town, if it had a business group, how could we get the private sector involved to take the lead? Because we shouldn't just sit back and expect everybody else to do it for us, and actually create our own website, our own platform to promote the town, because then everybody benefits as a result. That's great, except that every business organisation, whether it was a chamber or whatever, it was only as good as the chair that you had. So if you had a really good chair, they were thriving. And I've got wonderful case studies of wonderful organisations doing great things, working with the schools, doing fake interviews and all sorts of things, upskilling the schools and colleges. They were really inclusive. And then others, dare I say, that the chairs were of an age where they didn't even have an email address. So how you upskill those towns to create a group so that they own it and drive it, because there's no better advocate for a high street than the people who live there. But again, it's that collaboration. An example of that is when I was talking to the local haberdashery shop. I said, "Are you working? Have you talked to the major restaurant on the?" "Oh, no, because they're a hotel. We don't need to talk to them. We're just about the retail." "Well, why aren't you working together?" And there was a great Sudeley Castle, great visitor attraction. "Are you not working with Sudeley Castle to encourage those visitors into the?" "Oh, no, because that's an attraction. We don't have anything to do with them." So I think collaboration is key, how we do that and educate people on digital. Community, really important. And again, Pete knows this very well. Not actually on a high street. It was a tiny, in fact, I think it was the first out of town mini shopping centre. But this was amazing. This is in a very, very deprived area. And it was literally being vandalised. It was a disaster. It was on its knees. And one inspirational lady took one of those empty shops. She managed to get it for no money. And she put her head above the parapet, and she created a space called Create on the Square to encourage enterprise. And everybody said it won't work, they'll have bricks through the window, it'll be a disaster. Well, the great story is they created so much footfall because it was community owned and community driven, and they even had a little coffee shop in there, that on the strength of the footfall and the fact that that community started to plant up the planters, they weren't sitting back for the council to do it, they did it themselves. Suddenly a WH Smith opened because they had the footfall. So it was asked about face in many ways. It was the community taking the ownership and driving it, rather than sitting back and looking to everybody else. So I think ownership, community is really important. I think as well, I've done a lot of work in tourism, and I think there was interesting conversation about brand. And I think we need to have those independent shops on our high street that have a lovely mix, because it's all going to be about experiences, and food and drink's really important in that. But we almost need to create those sort of mini brand identities for our towns and work more closely with the destination management organisations. And that's fine. The big towns, Gloucester and Cheltenham, have bids, and they work closely with the marketing Cheltenham and marketing Gloucester. But the small, tiny towns are on their knees and struggling. And if a mini town like Tetbury, where Prince Charles lives, is struggling to get footfall with all the tourists, and this is before COVID, may I say. The next thing that I think is really important is about mixed use. So instead of sitting back and just thinking it's only going to be about retail, again, when I was in Cornwall, a very, very challenged rural town called Holsworthy, even then 10 years ago, the high street was on its knees, and an inspirational councillor said, we've got all these spaces above the shops which are empty. How can we change that into properly affordable housing? Because actually, when you say affordable, to many rural communities, they still can't afford it. So they actually changed it into living, and they used people that had been long-term unemployed, young people, upskilled them. They volunteered their time to do the makeovers. They made the space, and suddenly you had young families back into the heart of the towns, which were all shopping in the local shops, which is amazing. Food and drink, I know that's my day job. That's what I'm passionate about, is provenance. And again, I think food and drink is going to be massively important. We've got 2 towns that have got empty BHS stores, and they're saying it's no good just putting retail in for the sake of it. What can we do? Can we make it a destination? Exactly what you said, Rich. So it's about promoting it as a destination. So you've got visitors, tourists, the people who live there, all using that, but multi-use, again, education, tasting, all those things, because you can't do that online. So how can you do things differently? So food and drink is a great example. And I think I've nearly got over it. Education, obviously, we know that. We've got to educate our businesses to think differently and embrace the new world, because so many people are stuck and resistant to change. But ultimately, and I'll end on this because it's the word we hate to talk about, it's about ownership and it's about funding. Because yes, it's great when a community steps up and takes ownership, but often you'll find where it falls apart is it's like nobody's got any money, so they can't do anything. But I think with my CSR consultancy head on, I think in the new world, there are going to be more businesses that are going to want to give back as part of their social responsibility, and no better for a business to give back in their local community. And I'll shut up now. Sorry.
Wow, Claire, write a book.
I might do.
Seriously, I liked all of your ideas. We could have this group could have a conversation for about 4 or 5 hours, I think. Yeah, really parsing some of your ideas into actionable work, and I really appreciate your thoughtfulness about all of these good ideas.
Thank you.
Yeah. It is clear that you worn many hats. So
yeah, afraid so. Sorry.
Kudos to you. Thank you so much. Lisa Sweeting, please give us your insights and let us know what we can do next.
Wow, how do I follow that? So hi everyone, I'm Lisa. I am based in Wells in Somerset. And I suppose I was thinking about this earlier, and I know we talked quite a bit in the question storming about kind of the comparisons between digital, being able to order things on demand, and that kind of, it's quick, it's easy, we're at home, so it gets delivered to our houses. And I thought, it's hard to know how to compete with that, and actually I don't think we should try and compete with that, because the whole reason we order online is because, like I say, it's quick, it comes to our houses. And the thing with Amazon is that you don't even pay delivery for quite a lot of things, so you're not having to factor that in. But I have been shopping on say sites like Etsy, and the reason why I do that is because I want something which is made here in this country and it's local, but then obviously you've got to factor in delivery charges and things like that. So I thought, why do I go to my high street? I go to my high street for an experience. If I want clothes, I will go to a mall, and I will go there because of selection shops. I go to my high street because it's an afternoon out, it's a day out, I go there for a coffee, I go there for an experience. And quite often the high street is the centre of a town or a city. It's the kind of the heart, it's the beating heart. And so I think in some ways we need to really embrace that. And reflect that town and that community, and reflect the kind of the talents and the abilities within that town and community on our high street. Because like Rich was saying, you can't get that online. And so, you know, I go to my local high street because it has unique and interesting and different things to buy or to look at. And so I think we need to kind of take that opportunity and reflect that kind of the independent stores and the local kind of not only clothes or gifts, but also foodstuffs. You know, I go to my local high street to buy things like to go to the butchers and to go to the greengrocers, because I can't get that experience, and often it's wrapped in plastic in the supermarket. So I'll go to my local town for
Lisa,
that.
who would take the lead to sort of reflect these experiences to others? Who would be leading that charge?
I think it needs to come from the community. I think like independent shop owners are the ones that are kind of sidelined slightly. And quite often when you go to a town, you find that those little independent shops are kind of like off the side street. And I don't know if that's because it's expensive to be on the high street. And I think maybe that needs to be looked at, because, you know, it's kind of, you've got an opportunity if you're on the high street. You're kind of, you know, you're in a more expensive
status,
building. And so I think that needs to come in some ways from the bottom up. You know, the kind of the independent owners and the people who want those stores there need to be shouting about it to kind of raise that with the local councils and the people who make the decisions. We can't leave it up to the decision makers at the top to kind of make those decisions for us. So I think very much it needs to come from the bottom up in some ways. So yeah, and I think it will help to kind of make people appreciate the value of things, because, you know, we talk about this kind of the digital age and the sort of how easy it is to get things. And I think that sort of becomes an issue, because then we talk about, I mean, obviously I'm all about sustainability and kind of protecting the environment. And we can get things so easily now that we don't understand and appreciate the value of things. And so I think that's where our high street and our independence and our local kind of talent kind of comes into play, because you can actually get out there and you can feel it and you can touch it and you can appreciate the value of something and the kind of the time that's gone into producing something.
Thank you so much. I like that idea about mixing it all. Caroline Cunningham, and for those of you that weren't, that are just joining us, well, there are 3 of us from the United States and the rest of us are from the UK and different parts of the UK. So Caroline Cunningham is from Washington, DC. Go ahead, Caroline. What are your insights about our question storming session earlier?
So thanks all for the earlier session, which I found so interesting, especially because it reminded us all that we need community, you know, that everybody's on our little boxes and we all need to talk together to find solutions. And I found the exercise of just asking questions so insightful. A couple of observations. One is, and this kind of echoes what Claire and Lisa was saying, that having a local community and a strong leader are really important in creating a new ecosystem. In the United States, we have, and in particularly in Washington, have started these entities called business improvement districts, and they're led by an individual that the community hires. It's funded by a tax mechanism, a very small tax that everybody in the business community pays into the system that goes back into the community, so that there's a funding mechanism, at least at a bottom level, for some leadership to happen. And the other portion of the money goes to things like hiring people to keep the community clean and the high streets clean, and also creating a green infrastructure around it to make a destination that people want to go to. I don't know if you're all familiar with Richard Florida, who runs an international organization called the Creative Class, and he estimates that between 20 and 30% of the new workforce will work remotely. And to what Lisa's point I thought was so spot on is that people want to go to their high streets to have an experience. You know, Paris is learning this by creating a new green Champs-Élysées, which narrows these grand boulevards, which coincidentally we have in Washington, D.C., because we were designed by Pierre L'Enfant. But they are looking at narrowing the streets, making them green, and creating a destination, which tells you a lot about what people are, you know, craving right now post-pandemic, of having a community and a green and fun space to go. Just two other quick things. I was recently leading up an effort for the Pennsylvania Avenue partnership. We have another grand boulevard that goes from the Capitol to the White House, most recently used for a not so exciting happening, but the community is really interested in creating destination events that have national and international significance, that highlight the space into something other than the big grand avenue. And this kind of, you know, harkens to the Champs-Élysées approach. But how do you use the space to generate energy, enthusiasm, art, activity that creates a reason for the community to attend? And I think that that's a super interesting solution. And then I would just say, lastly, there are a lot of cities that are creating these destination locations. And I think this is particularly important as office space is envisioned, of creating social hubs for work that are not the WeWork kind of places where people go to a cube, but people who want to go have a cup of coffee and be in a community other than boxes on a screen, to be creative and share ideas and do business. So that would be, I think, the third element. So not only green space, beautiful space, a tax structure to support it, and a leadership structure that pulls all parts of the community together, so that it's not just business, but it's the nonprofit communities, it's religious institutions, it's government entities creating a destination location.
Caroline, I love those ideas. I think we're of one mind about so much of that. Let me ask you, when you were talking about this office space for meeting space more than just working, you know, in a cubicle somewhere. Right. That shared office space idea has been around for a long time. But how would that need special kinds of promotion to get people to say, just come to this new physical location where you can just hang out, rather than a bar or a restaurant or how would that work, do you think?
You know, Microsoft has done this and Apple has done this really well. So that's sort of this balance, right, between a large corporation that has a footprint in a high street and a small local community that has a coffee shop. So in Berlin, Microsoft has a destination, so you go and so you can get your computer fixed and you can pick up, you know, your cable and your cord or whatever, or you can talk to a techie to fix your thing. But they also have a coffee shop inside of it that's run by the local community entrepreneur, so that it's not only a business destination, but it's also personal in that it marries big companies with a local company and a place to be. So they're concept stores, and they're in Paris, they're in Berlin. They just actually started in the United States, in Washington. Banks are doing it now in DC, creating places for you to go and do your banking, because those large corporations have the financial resources to pay the rent, but also support the local community at the same time, which I think is a nice way to marry the two.
Yeah, no, I love that idea. And I think there's this is outside of the box, right? I mean, we don't normally have coffee shops in our local bank. But there's one right down the street from me. So although I've not been in it, but thank you, Caroline. Gamu, what about your insight? Oh, yeah, we'll get to you, Jim, in just a minute. Gamu, give us your insights about what you learned from the question storming and what, in a couple minutes or around that, what you learned from it and what you might see going forward.
Okay, well, I'm Gamu and I'm based in Bristol. So this was really interesting, mainly because I've been out of the UK actually for the last 5 years. So I'm recently back. And so I've had to actually rethink about, I've been in the Middle East.
Good. Okay.
Right. So I've actually had to really think about what was my experience in high streets 5 years ago, because of course the Middle East is set up completely differently. But there were a couple of key terms that were popping out constantly in the earlier session, and they were sort of integration, inclusion, and wider participation. They're the three key things that came out. And really, if we look at, because there's this localized idea around high streets. So I was just thinking, you can only truly create value when you fully understand the marketplace, right? And the high street is very local to the community. So a good place to probably start is to put together focus groups within the community to actually start to understand, say you put together groups of women, young people, groups of men, understand what exactly is it that they want and what's changed for them over time in reflecting on what's actually happened economically and locally within Britain. And then ask them how best to serve them, how best local trade can actually serve them. This actually gives you the data. But also asking them how they feel they can support the high street, how they can contribute, because a lot of people have probably never been, this question's probably never been posed to them, right? Looking at it the other way around, how can we contribute to the high street as consumers? And in order to engage the wider network of stakeholders, I think you need a platform that allows for all voices to be heard, whether it's the consumer, local suppliers, local MPs, but where everyone has actual access to the viewpoint of unlikely stakeholders that they don't necessarily engage with on a day-to-day basis.
How do you see that playing out, Gamu? Just to push that a little bit, who's creating that platform? What does it look like from your perspective? What's that about?
I think you need a local steering group or working group which is represented by the different stakeholders within the community. So social media is a great way. And I don't know if a lot of you have heard about this new app called Clubhouse that completely disrupted social media at the moment. And it's what's happening on there is a lot of changes taking place through people being visible, being heard, and having access to groups of people that they would not necessarily interact with normally. So a format like that, whether it's a local radio station or a Clubhouse format, for example, where you do get to debate the issues within your community with everyone involved, and it's open for everyone to come on board.
Well, you put your finger on one of my total passions, is that we find ways to, quote, hear all the voices. Easier said than done, in terms of social media is certainly one door into it, but, hearing voices from disadvantaged populations, communities of color. I mean, even those that don't have access to internet or computers. I mean, there's got to be a way to be more inclusive. Maybe I'll definitely look up Clubhouse. That's a great lead.
Sure.
Did you have anything else to add about your insights?
It'll probably go on. I don't know if I should start.
We'll come back to you. I think we may have time to have each of you do a sort of a closing thought, but let's go on to Sue. Sue from Marchand, go ahead.
Thanks, Andy. In terms of the question storming, I thought it was brilliant. It really made me broaden my thoughts and challenged me in ways I don't normally get challenged on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, so thanks everyone. My my passion is about helping business owners to reach their full potential, to help them to get to a place that they want their business to be. And I have to mirror what Claire and Caroline said around business associations, the importance of businesses coming together, so through Chamber of Commerce or through local business associations, where businesses are able to support each other, do business together, and importantly, learn from each other and share best practice. When you run a business, it can be a very, very lonely place to be, and you forget that there's a bigger community out there who can help you and who can support you, and you can learn from them to make your business.
Sure. Sue, are you involved with helping businesses do just that? I mean, is that happening in your community?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're fortunate enough to be delivering the business support on behalf of South Gloucestershire Council. We deliver the business support service. So we're working alongside Manor and his team to provide support and advice and training to local businesses across South Gloucestershire. And one of the things we're finding is the benefit of bringing these businesses together is that they can talk to each other, they can network with each other, and learn from each other. So yeah, we're really seeing a difference that can make just through talking, just through that interaction with each other.
Yeah, well, maybe we just need more of that going forward.
Yeah, and there is support out there. So
yeah,
checking in with your local authority, your local enterprise partnership, and understanding what support is available for you out there that's funded.
Yeah, great. Jim Payne, what are your insights and ideas? In a couple minutes, give us your sort of takeaway from this morning and what ideas you have about future, the future.
First of all, Sandy, thank you for asking me to be a part of this. That it was very thought-provoking, challenging, stimulating, all the above. So I have 2 degrees in marketing, undergraduate as well as graduate. And so we all know about the 4 Ps. We speak of the high, and also you asked about our passions before we started this. One of my passions is history. So if you go back 100 years ago, or even further, there only was High Street. Every city had its own shopping venue, and Washington, D.C. was F Street or H Street Northeast, and there were socio-demographic barriers. What I'm concerned about is that what part of the solution is, I think we have to stop thinking about High Street in this nebulous sense, and then have a clear definition of what is the product and what is the product experience. So for example, here in Georgetown, you have vacant shops all over the place, but then you have people waiting in line for 90 minutes for the privilege of buying a $6 cupcake. And I believe they're not selling cupcakes. I believe what they're selling is this interpersonal reaction as you wait for 90 minutes with a bunch of strangers. We have a cookie shop that just opened from New York, a block-long line. So what I see as part of our solution, for example, is have a branding exercise and a marketing exercise. I'm a huge participant in the Georgetown flea market as a vendor as well as a buying there. I mean, I do both. Across the street is a Safeway. In that Safeway, you can have your dog groomed, you can have your nails, you can have your hair cut, you can have your dry cleaning, there's a Starbucks. They have created this environment. Across the street is the Georgetown flea market. That's very atypical of Georgetown, but it's a high demand. Now, Safeway is not necessarily the best marketing. Well, it's not too bad, but I think it's very clever. This is the 4th Safeway on the same spot, right? So I think we have to have this sense of community. Another experience we have in Georgetown, Caroline mentioned BID, the Business Improvement Development Organization. I recently joined the board of the Duke Ellington School for the Arts, which is a performance art high school, one of the highest academic schools in the city. And yet they sit there and no one has ever attempted to integrate them into this business plan. They have musicals, they have Dream Girls, wonderful performances, but no one has thought to incorporate that one element. So I'm working with BID for them to see that as an extension to help the school, help the community. If you want restaurant participants, why not have a roving a band of people singing arias of music? We walk past these ideas and we're not having the. Do the residents of Georgetown like High Street, or do they see it as an interference in their day-to-day commerce? These used to be our little local shops where you go to the barber shop and go to the the hardware store, but now it draws people internationally. Does the community like that? To me, it's a question mark. Does the Citizens Association of Georgetown actually want to foster a better High Street experience? And so I think we're in this dilemma. We don't have a definition of the product. We don't have the definition of the benefits from the product. And yet we're surrounded by wonderful ideas. The DuPont Circle has a farmer's market on Sundays. And it's jammed with people. Why are they so successful, and why are we can't keep people in shops? Why do we think of these as silos? So when I travel in London, I find it fascinating that in a very upscale men's shop, you can have your hair cut. There's a combination of two brands that complement each other. You got to get your hair cut every now and then, and why not have an expensive shop that you can buy clothes in? Apple store is right next to Britches. Can Britches impact the brand of the Apple, and could Apple impact the smaller brands in the community? Are we reaching out to them to stimulate that kind of thinking? It's just not one problem, it's a myriad of problems. And I think part of this communication, this exercise we're doing right now could be very helpful in this city across all the other cities. Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you, Jim. I love those thoughts. And, you know, some of this is happening real world. So it's not like, as you just said, we have wonderful ideas. Can we get those implemented? I'm just going to interrupt the next person, which would be, who hasn't talked yet? Well, Pete, you haven't talked yet, right? And Manor, we come to Manor last. But one of the things I wanted to say was that I work with a company that does artificial intelligence to gather data about what people really care about. It's a very quick and inexpensive process. They basically review all social media. They review all public documentation, town halls, city meetings, etc. And they pull it together to say, the mayor, the leader of the city, thinks that the real problem is crime, for example. But when you see what people are talking about and what they really care about, it's much more, for example, about affordable housing. So we can think we know what people want, but how do we really find that out? Certainly focus groups, town halls are another mechanism. But the brilliance of this artificial intelligence technology to really survey social media, you can do it by zip code in the United States or by region in the UK. You can really find out what people care about. And it's not just what they care about, but their level of sentiment. Are they happy about it? Or are they mad about it? You can really see this. And I'm going to talk to several of you after this call. This is the wave of the future, to use technology for good that would really illuminate the things they want and the things we could actually do to help. So I just had to throw that out. More later on that topic. Pete, let's go to you, and then Manor at the end, and then final comments.
And I'd endorse what you just said there, Sandra, and Claire referred to Maybe as a company earlier, and you more or less described what you've got in the States. That's more or less exactly what Maybe is here, grown in Gloucestershire, but working across the Southwest widely, so I'd endorse that. There are three sort of conceptual things that came out of the question storming for me earlier, which was a really fascinating process, followed by two slightly more granular things, I think, which come out of this session there. And I think the first things for me is we need to understand the function of any given high street. I'm here in Cheltenham, and Cheltenham High Street is a fairly substantial area. The town has got 120,000 in the population. That high street serves a purpose, and it's a fairly commercial purpose, as any high street is. But then I also live near a local, what we would describe as a local high street. It's known as Bath Road here in Cheltenham. And that is more of a community space. Now it's still a commercial space, don't get me wrong, but the two functions are very different, and that came up to me. And I think when we talk about a given high street, we do need to understand what that high street is doing, because a town centre doesn't have the residential community that a local high street will have, and a village high street even more so. So that's one thing. The second thing coming out, I think, is the community is just critical. The community owns, lives, eats, sleeps, breathes. It is whatever the high street will be, what the community wants it to be. And in that sense, the community has to own the concept, and the community has to have integrity, and that's a bigger issue than the high streets issue. It's something we face all over the place. But you know, one of the simplistic comments that was made in the question storming earlier, which is so true, is, you know, how many of us go and look at something in a shop and then go and buy it online? Now, if you've got big enough organisations to cope with being able to handle both sides of that story, then that's great. But your local guy on the high street doesn't have that, and actually so the community does have to take responsibility for this and actually decide what it wants. And the third conceptual thing around that would be a strong high street keeps a circular economy moving. It keeps a pound, dollar, local. And actually, you know, a dollar, a pound spent on the local high street will employ, it'll be respent down the road at the greengrocers on the way home. It'll be respent in the corner shop. It'll keep the whole thing local. And that is very important for so many aspects of economy. So those are three conceptual things. It was interesting to hear the comments earlier about the space, the creative space where people can just drop in and get a coffee and not be in a cubicle. It's really interesting. The two primary areas that we as projects serve at the moment, Gloucestershire and South Gloucestershire. So if I think of Gloucestershire, we have a thing called the Growth Hub at Gloucester University, which is more or less to a space exactly what you've just described. The flaw in the argument is it's in the university, not in the high street. If you take the Growth Hub and plonk it on the high street, that's a really interesting thing. Now, that's something that could be done. You know, it has been decided to build it in the university, and I understand that's part of the business school, etc., etc. But why do we do that in the university? If you look in South Gloucestershire, we operate when we're down there in the forum at the Bristol Bar Science Park. Again, very similar concept. A lot of business done at the Bristol Bar Science Park. It's not got a cubicle inside. It does have about 50 in-house businesses tucked away behind the scenes, but it's just, you know, rows of tables and a coffee space, and it's a buzzing space when it's allowed to be COVID standing. And not obviously it belongs to Bristol Bar Science Park. It's on the Bristol Bar Science Park. That is not in the centre of Bristol or in the centre of the high street. Got that, and there's a reason for that. But if you imagine taking that concept and plonking it on the high street, then, you know, you've got the same thing going on. So these things are achievable. And that sort of leads me to the last granular point. While I think free enterprise businesses can certainly deliver much of the operational side of what we're talking about, because ultimately, commercially speaking, they'll go where the commerce is. They won't initiate, they won't collaborate, they won't innovate on their own back. They won't be, because the commercial premises, commercial businesses work on percentages and margins. They're risk averse. They will do what they know how to do. So I think ultimately the development of the high street and the development and the build of the community cannot be driven purely by the private sector. Private sector is important, but it can't be driven by the private sector. Whether it needs governmental input, charity third sector input to initiate, to put down the markers, to put in primary investment, conditional on the private sector following suit. So the coffee shop that operates in the hub, of course it will be a private sector thing. It does well. And you put the other businesses with, you know, around the edge of the hub, they'll do well, but they won't do it on their own. So I think when we talk about the how do we do it, somehow, whether, as I say, it's third sector and charity based, or whether it's governmentally based, the driving feel has got to come from that community, and that will help build the community, because those organizations, those two typical organizations I've just described, are community driven. Local authority is voted in, paid for by the taxpayer. It's a taxpayer governed unit, and Manor, I'm sure we'll comment on that in a moment. Third sector, on the edge of the Bath Road where I live, there are two churches. One is in the middle right now, the massive refurb to become a 400-seater venue that's got ecology and the environmental at its heart. It is still a church, but the church is turning its space over to be a community venue. On the other side, there's another church which has talked about and hasn't got as far as doing anything about creating this working hub coffee thing in a church space that it happens to have. COVID's put pay to all that, but the thinking is there. So those sorts of things can be done. And Claire, you know, Create on the Square, which Claire mentioned, has been done in another part of Cheltenham, exactly the same again. So those are my thoughts. These things are achievable, but they have to be driven and centrally, and that I think.
Okay, well, you know, Pete, you could be a champion for this.
We try. hey, Claire, there's a reason I brought Claire onto this.
Yes, no, well, I was just going to say, I see several partnerships blossoming here. Manor, we definitely want to hear from you. Tell us your insights and maybe what you're going to do. No pressure.
Pressure is on, Sandra. Pressure is on. Look, it's from a local authority perspective.
And Manor, mention where you're from and your job.
We always say South Gloss. Yeah, South Gloss Council Economic Development Team. So we have the relationship with the local business communities, and we have our kind of mantle is with South Gloss Council is South Gloss as a county is a place to live and work. And I echo what everyone has just commented on, the solutions to revitalizing, regenerating the high street. And this all starts with this starts with the community. It starts with the local authorities, with the local government agencies, the business support agencies are coming together, having a vision, what it takes to, as I said, to rejuvenate a high street. It's also about, Pete just mentioned the Bristol and Bath Science Park. The actual culture of the science park is of entrepreneurship, something which we perhaps need to encourage more. This is even pre-pandemic. The high streets have always, certainly for several years, if not longer, been suffering. And I think I mentioned it earlier. As a business owner, we have to, look at what the offering is, and how can we, in a sense, better that. I agree with what everyone says. I hear you. We, as a local authority, we have to listen to our businesses. We have to have those relationships. We have to establish those relationships. Whether it's done through business networks, whether it's done through various different business support programs. Sue mentioned the South Gloss Business Support Services, a new program that we've working in collaboration with Cool Ventures to deliver for businesses within South Gloss. We continue to do that. By no means are we perfect. There's so much going on. There's different pressures. As you can imagine, within local authorities, adult social care is high on the priority list, but so is the supporting of local businesses. And we are, in a sense, dictated by what the central government pushes onto us. So, as I said, my presence here today is, the Business Insight is a partnership with County Business Show, working with Pete to open to have these kind of opportunities, to open up dialogue, to talk to businesses, to come together, to talk about potential solutions to challenges that we have. And as I said, lots of these challenges are pre-pandemic, and nothing new. But these are not just because of the COVID situation. These are situations, these are challenges that we have to face together.
Well, thank you for that, Manor. One of the things that Pete and I talked about before creating this session was, there are barriers that you face on a daily basis, you and your team, the people you work with. I guess all of us that are involved somehow in helping cities or communities or urban spaces prosper. There's so many barriers about fighting the existing way of doing things the way we've always done it. And I think your pledge to continue to work with the county business shows. I hope anybody watching this will reach out to Manor and the other folks on this call, and, you know, just offer help and offer good ideas. I feel like there's got to be more of us owning it, if you will, and really figuring out how to, you know, how to change. Before I get to you, Cam, I saw your hand go up. I just wanted to mention one other thing that is really top of mind for me and my work at Personal Cities, and that is this idea of community identity, city branding. I don't often use the word brand image with cities because in some cases they find it, you know, too commercial, God forbid. But really, every city has certain strengths and qualities, and whether it's events or festivals or your geographic location, or as Rich mentioned, your 800-year history. I mean, every city has these kinds of benefits. And the question is, what can we do collectively and certainly within our own community to move that forward? I feel like that whole branding idea will not only help the small and medium-sized enterprises succeed, but will eventually help cities recover and thrive. So I'm like all over this. Anybody needing help with city and community identity, you know, call on me, call on Caroline. You know, all of us are interested in the U.S. and working together to help. And I certainly know within your local community, you're doing the same. Ken, you had a comment you wanted to make?
Yeah, just really to reflect on what Man has said. The Federation of Small Businesses holds local business awards for the authorities, the best local authorities. And we do this in regions around the country. And certainly South Gloucestershire Council, of which Man is from, have been beneficiaries of the awards in the past because of the work they do, which is really supportive of small business. And similarly, Bristol City Council have won the award as well. They've done some great work in helping set up small businesses and support small businesses. So
Great.
I think local authorities have got a place to play in helping the situation, providing they've got the will to do it.
That's right. And it is about our goodwill. I'm happy to have a couple more comments. We've just got maybe one more minute. I do want to leave this one quote with you. Oh, and Louise, by the way, will you be sure and save our chat? I think a lot of people might want to see that after this session. But I want to leave you with.
Can I just ask? Would everyone like us? We carefully put all your email addresses in the BCC for obvious reasons. Would it help if I close this? You know, not if I close it. Sorry, I wouldn't mean that at all. Would it help after this if I actually just drop a note to you all with emails open? Would people like that so you can exchange? Yeah, getting a nodding.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thumbs up for it. Nod. Yes.
If that's a problem, put your hand up now, and I'll exclude you. No, everybody's happy with that. So
Okay.
I'll do an email with open email so you can get each other's
Excellent.
contact details. Sorry,
Great.
I interrupted.
No, that's perfect. I was actually going to say one of the things that happens when you start question storming, and I don't think it happens in a normal meeting where you're asked a question and then you have to give an answer, is that we have a bond now. We've developed a trust, even if it's not a deep trust, but we've developed a trust with one another that I value your opinion. I hope you value mine, that we're more receptive and willing to listen in a more intense way. I want to leave you with this quote. It's from Buckminster Fuller. Many of you may know him as a genius, an architect, a creative thinker. He said that you never change things by fighting the existing reality. The only way to truly change things is to create new models and therefore find a new reality for us to live in. So I look forward to creating new models with all of you. I think that there is great opportunity, great hope for the future. No matter what future crises strike us, I feel like there's a huge optimism here. Anybody have a final comment? Anything you want to close with? Well, that's amazing. Eve, any final comments on your part as our host?
Only to say a wonderful thank you to all of you, as ever. In fact, it's a two-part thank you. It's a thank you for coming and joining and putting your input in, but also thank you for most of you taking a thumping great big step of faith when we come along to you and say, there's this thing called question storming. We'd love you to be involved, and you get this slightly mystified view, and they go, Okay. So I hope you've enjoyed it, but thank you for your input. We need that brain power.
Yeah, and one final comment is please feel free to do this in your own community, with your family. You know, gather your friends and your dogs and see what they think about question storming. I'm a real fan of helping us think creatively, and I think this is just one other way to do it.
We have found for the last several of these insights that we've done an international one now, this one, and a Gloucestershire one. Well, we didn't do it for them, but the question storming has been very good, and actually we now, for Business Insights, are very clear that we make this a feature piece of what we do because it's very important, and I think it's a good way of tackling things. The reason for saying that is we'll be looking at the Gloucestershire Business Show. Sorry, we will be looking at the Gloucestershire Business Show. That wasn't what I was meaning to say. We'll be looking at the South Gloucestershire Business Show in October with Manor sort of within milliseconds, I imagine, of finishing tomorrow. And one of the critical pieces that we will be thinking into there is what is that top level question that we want to look at in October. So I think most of you, well, the whole point of this is South Gloucestershire focus. So input to that would be extremely welcome. I'm sure either Manor or I would be happy to round that up.
Absolutely.
And we're doing an international show in June. And one of the shows we did earlier, Pete, was about placemaking. I think Claire wrote a note about placemaking. It's the same concept that, you know, the place in which we live, the place we choose to live in is now one of the choices we make. So this is all about this idea of community identity and branding. And we're going to keep hammering on it as we move into 2022.
I don't know what we'll be looking at the international one that we do in June. But the whole thing about doing it on the international basis is Sandra's got a whole raft of city leaders literally from around the world under her belt. And it just, if you want a different insight on whatever it is we tackle, watch out for that one.
Great. Thank you all. Thank you so much. And please stay in touch.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Sandra.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye for now.
Thank you, Louise.
Thank you, Sandra. I've saved the chat. So all
Well
good.
done.
Oh, thank you so much.
Very
Thank you
well.
for saving that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sandra.
Caroline, I'm so glad you could join us. Thank
It was
you.
fun. I had a great time.
Well, we'll talk later.
Okay.
Great.
Do we know how many people were actually listening to that?
Right now, as we close, the live watch is about 4, so it's not huge. But what we do is we put it on YouTube, and the live that goes out, they tend to range between, I don't know, 1s and 2s and about 20, 30. It's not huge.
Yeah.
But over time, when we can all post it, we can refer to it. The archive view is far greater. And the reason we do these is to capture the value of the conversation more than necessarily make a showcase out of the moment, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. Great. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Rich.
Rich.
I'm so glad to meet you. I'm coming to Chipping Sudbury.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Give us a shout when you're here. We'll take you shopping.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Love it, Sandra. You love it. Everybody does.
Hey, Pete, I think the next, thank you, Rich.